Hi everybody, I'm Courtney and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, a little about me. I'm a nutritionist and I specialize in the areas of juice cleansing, plant-based nutrition, healing overeating, and achieving permanent weight loss. And in this video, we're going to continue the topic of healing overeating and discussing how to do that. And I really love talking about emotions and the soul, and I feel passionate about discussing how to heal food addiction and binge eating because this is something that I struggled with massively in my life. And I've had some success with changing that. And so I really want to share what I've learned and what I've experimented with that has worked for me and for other people who have ended up doing similar things to me. For me, that's worked for them too. Now, this angle we're going to be talking about is about the human soul and emotions related to overeating. And that is because I believe that that is the real root cause of binge eating. It has to do with our soul and our emotions. So that's why we're going to go there. And specifically today, I want to talk about the topic of moving from a lack of awareness into a state of awareness about the real causes of food addiction. So moving from a state of denial about why we have it into a state of awareness about why we have it. Now, why is that important? That's important because you can't heal what you don't know about. You can't change what you're not aware of. And so one of the first steps in the process of healing overeating is to become aware of the truth about the reasons why. And I also want to talk about moving from awareness, non-awareness to awareness about our attitudes towards emotions, which is another factor that affects our eating. So the first thing I want to discuss to lay the groundwork is about the human soul and about emotions. Now, I've learned about the, emotions and emotional healing from a lot of different resources, but the main thing that's helped me, that has been the best education about it, is the Divine Truth teachings. And so to learn about the human soul and about emotions, I recommend them. I will put a link to their website below this video. Okay, so the groundwork I want to lay here is that the human soul is incredibly powerful. So your soul, my soul, everyone has a soul, and that is what is driving our lives and our decisions and the things that we do. More than any other factor, the human soul is the driver. It's what's affecting everything. And so when we're talking about the question of how do I stop eating all the cookies because I am really uncomfortable with my extra weight and I don't know how to stop this cycle of binging, I believe that to answer that question, we need to take it all the way back to what is going on in our soul. And so the groundwork I want to lay is this fact that the soul is the most powerful thing. All of our emotions, be it negative, I don't really love that word, but negative or positive, all of our emotions, painful, pleasurable, everyone is contained in the soul. And so our soul and our emotions are what is driving things. And from that, what I want to basically say that we're going to use to talk about food and eating is that the soul is more powerful than anything. So in other words, your soul is got the ability to override a lot of things. It's got the ability to change a lot of things. It's got the ability to defy a lot of odds. And that is where the real power comes from. And that is the real determining factor and the real driver of our food addictions. So the reason I wanted to establish that is because I want to compare what many people feel are physical causes of food addiction with what I feel is the more powerful thing, which is the emotional causes of food addiction. So when I have clients and I talk to them about how their binge eating is an emotional thing, it's about something that is going on in their soul. It's about wanting to avoid emotions. So I say, the overeating is caused by our desire to suppress emotions. It's driven by different choices that we're making related to that. And many people in response sometimes say to me, well, maybe, But I think more what it is, for example, I think more what it is that the sugar is addictive in the brain, similar to drugs, and that's why I do it. Or I think the issue is that, the I had the sugar, and then because I had it and it affects me in a certain way, then that sent me into this phase of binging. Or, I think it's because my physical body is like addicted to this food, and so that's why I keep going for it over and over. And that's a real thing. So these physical things are real. There are scientific studies done on how sugar affects refined sugar, by the way, affects the body similarly in certain ways as drugs. It is physically addictive. There are plenty of studies about the ratios of sugar and fat and salt and how that is very pleasurable to the taste buds and, has a physical effect to make the food be more enticing. And so that's all true. I'm not arguing with the reality of any of that. And in fact, when I first started studying nutrition, that was one of the shocking things for me, was to learn about, so for example, one of the things I remember reading and learning about from books and things was how a lot of big food companies hire very qualified, intelligent scientists to literally engineer the food in a way that will make it physically addictive so that you will keep buying it. And at first I thought, well, that sounds like a conspiracy theory to me. Like that, I just wouldn't have guessed that something would be so intentional. But, these companies are a lot about profit. And so from that standpoint, it does make sense. And the way that these foods affect our body is a reality. So again, I literally talk to nutrition clients about that. So I'm often educating them about how those things are affecting their body physically. But if we're talking about binge eating and overeating and really the heart, really the root cause of why we do that and why we struggle with it over and over again and why we can't break it, it's going to be about the soul. And it's going to be about our emotions. So what I basically believe is that the physical reality is true. All of those studies are true. Everything that, people discuss is, if it's been scientifically proven, yep, there's a physical reality to that. But I also believe that the human soul is more powerful than any biochemical or biochemistry factor. So I believe that our emotions and our soul can essentially override anything that is happening in terms of those other things. So I'm not saying don't pay attention to those other things. And I'm also not saying go out and eat a bunch of sugar because your soul is what matters anyway, because that's not true. We have a physical body. There are realities about how you take care of it. There's realities about how you work, how it works. And you have to pay attention to those and act in a way that hopefully will be preserving to it, and also there's the self-love factor. The reality is that if we have a feeling of self-love and self-respect, the more that grows, the more that we want to pay attention to nutrition and feed our body good things. But the thing that's really driving the overeating is the soul, and that can override any of these other things. So just as a personal example, for example, I know for myself that because I've healed some of the root causes of my binge eating, I'm not through all of my food addiction yet, but it is night and day different than how it used to be. And now I can have some of these things that supposedly, from some people's perspective, is the cause of the food addiction. So for example, I can have something with refined sugar, or I can have something that has been optimized in some way that's addictive to the body. And it doesn't send me into a spiral of binge eating. It doesn't send me over the edge where, now I'm just eating everything sweet in sight. And so for me, that's been an interesting experience because I've gone, okay, yeah, so I can feel the physical effects if I have stuff that's addictive or that's sugary. I can feel sometimes maybe even an increase in wanting more of it. and kind of my taste buds really like, getting overstimulated and all that. But there's obviously something else that is more powerful than that. And I do believe that that has to do with the soul and the underlying emotions. And to me, that's also logical because I think that it makes sense that the way God would have created our souls is that our souls are, how to say it? It feels to me like the soul is basically more powerful than the body. It's probably the easiest way to simplify it. The soul's more powerful than the body. The emotions are more powerful than the body. And so in the process of healing overeating, that is where you want to focus. So that's the first main point that I want to talk about in terms of moving from a place of denial into awareness is we got to get out of a denial that if we have severe binge eating and food addiction, that it's mostly a biochemistry thing. And start thinking that, okay, there's the biochemistry factors, but my soul and my emotions are more powerful and can override these things. And that's where I want to focus. The second thing that I want to discuss in terms of moving into awareness is about our attitudes towards emotions. So, again, the food addictions are about avoiding emotions. So we have the desire to overeat and to eat a lot of junk food because we have the desire to suppress our feelings. And that's true for any kind of physical or emotional addiction, is that it's driven from that desire to avoid things that are in our soul and avoid our feelings. And another level of awareness that I had to come to, and that I still am often constantly having to come to in regards to healing the next layer of my food addiction, is those of us that have food addiction and binge eating, we aren't actually as comfortable with emotions as we might want to think. And so I wanted to bring that up because, like for me, when I was having the food addiction the most severely and the binging the most severely, I probably would have thought that I was quite comfortable with emotions and that I didn't have a lot of blocks to feeling emotions, and that, I was sort of quite connected to myself emotionally. But what I feel for myself, and this may be true for you too, is that really my food, what I do with food and my eating, is always the truth teller. So if I think I'm connected to myself emotionally, and I think that I'm comfortable with emotions, but I'm still struggling a lot with the food addiction and the binge eating, that for me has always been the point where I can kind of go, all right, I must not be as comfortable as I think with emotions, because if I was, I probably wouldn't have the need to suppress them. And so the eating is always the truth teller about really how comfortable we are with our feelings. And that is another level of awareness that we want to come to, is that we may not be as comfortable with our feelings as we might want to think. But that is not something to judge yourself for or get down on yourself for. And that brings me to the next point I want to talk about, which is very important, which is have compassion for all this and don't judge. This has been a challenging video for me to make because I feel like it's important, but I don't, like, even using the word denial sometimes makes people feel like it's a strong word. But it's not there because it's meant to make you feel bad or judge yourself. It's just a fact that when we are in denial of something, or we don't want to know something, or we don't have the awareness, that we can't really change it. And so it's an important factor to affect it. But there's a lot of reasons why it's important to not judge yourself for that and to have compassion for it. But one of the reasons, the key reasons, which is, a whole other thing we could explore in many more videos, which I plan to, is that there are reasons, very understandable reasons, that anyone who has food addiction, there are understandable reasons why you want to avoid the emotions. So if you have the food addiction, that's something to judge. If you still struggle with it after years, don't judge that. And, if you come to find that, in fact, you're not as comfortable with emotions as maybe you wanted to think, or you're just flat out not. Maybe you don't even try to think that you are. You just know you're not. But none of those things are anything to judge. The reason being is that there are reasons for that. The most likely thing is that something happened, or probably a whole series of things happened in your childhood and when you were growing up that were the reason why you are not very comfortable with feeling emotions. That's been true for me as well. I have realized that I have had such severe binge eating because of how much I didn't want to connect to my own emotions and how not okay with emotions I have been and still am in a lot of ways. And that there are reasons for that have to do with how I was treated, what I was taught about emotions, the emotional climate in my family growing up. There's, and I don't want to go into that whole thing because that's probably good for another video to go into. But the reason I'm bringing it up now is because I want you to have gentleness and kindness and compassion about the food addictions that you have. And I want you to have gentleness and kindness and compassion about any lack of comfort with feeling emotions. You need to be really gentle about all of this because there are reasons. It's not just that you're broken. It's not just that you lack willpower. It's not just that there's something wrong with you. There has to have been things that happened to you and ways that you were treated that resulted in you wanting to suppress the emotions and then therefore creating an addiction, in this case with food, in order to do that. And that is something you have to have a lot of compassion for because it wasn't your fault at the beginning. I mean, now if you're an adult, which I assume you are if you're watching this video, if you're an adult, then, now it's our responsibility to feel what's in our soul and to heal those emotions and to have that reckoning, that soul reckoning, and soften to our emotions so that we can heal it. And only we can do that. But when it comes to the root causes of why you want to avoid emotions, that's probably going to be about your childhood and it's not going to be your fault. And so a lot of compassion is needed in this process. But that being said, it is also still, even though, that those beginning root causes of why you might want to avoid emotions would have happened when you were a defenseless child who couldn't help the situation. But we still need to be aware of the truth about why we have the food addiction in order to start changing it. And if all this is overwhelming at all, the other thing I want to remind you is that God can help you with this. So whatever your belief in God, or wherever that stands now, I want to say that I really believe that God gets it and God can help you with those emotions and God can help you find the reasons why you have the food addiction. God can help you find the reasons why you want to avoid the emotions and therefore created the addictions. You're not alone in this. You're not alone in it in the sense if there's other people who would love to help. I would love to help you. My friends Jesus and Mary who teach the Divine Truth material love to help you, but also you've got God too. And I'd love to make a whole video actually about God's help in healing food addiction, which mainly has to do with God's help in helping us feel our emotions, because I think that would be cool. So in conclusion, what we talked about in this video is it is important for us to become aware of the real causes of food addiction before we can really change it. And that's why we need to do that. The other thing we talked about is how the soul is more powerful than anything else. It's more powerful than our biochemistry, and our emotions are what is driving things. We also talked about how healing overeating requires feeling our emotions and is a soul-based process. And we also talked about how one of the other awarenesses we need to come to is that if we have the food addiction and the overeating, that is a truth teller for us about how comfortable we actually are when it comes to sitting with our emotions and feeling our real emotions and facing the truth about that. And lastly, we discussed how with all of this, you need to be very gentle, compassionate with yourself, and not judge yourself for any of what you do or where you're at. And lastly, I'll just give you some resources so you can find more information on me at my website, which is courtneypoole.com, just my name. And then again, you can find more information about the soul and emotions and healing food addiction from the Divine Truth material. That website is divinetruth.com, and I will link that below as well. So I hope this has been helpful for everyone, and I will look forward to talking to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.